Given that Trump imposed at least a 10% tariff on every single country in the world, although this was quickly lifted, and the fact that there was a national security leak thanks to a mistake by National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, it's no surprise that Trump currently has a negative approval rating according to most polls. However, what's his approval rating in every single state? In today's video, we're gonna find out. Now, this is not your generic electoral map. You're actually going to see that the red indicates disapproval and the green indicates approval, as opposed to, the red indicating support of Donald Trump. But without further ado, let's get started. Let's start off here with the states that approve of Trump by a safe margin. These are, of course, the red states, the states that voted for Trump by significant margins back in 2020, 2016, and 2024. These are states that approve of Trump by at least 12%. This is not much of a surprise. We actually don't have Missouri here in the safe column. We do have West Virginia as safe, and I believe that is pretty much it for the safe states for Donald Trump. So these are states that approve of Trump by at least 15%. So if you don't really have the district-wide numbers, I'm just going to put Nebraska second as well. And same for Maine, it will go with the rest of the state of Maine. That wraps up all the states that approve of Trump here by a safe margin. Some of the most extreme states include the state of Wyoming in this case, where Trump has a 73% approval rating and just a 23% disapproval rating. Most of the other states are somewhere around approved plus 20 to about approved plus 30. Wyoming in this case is approved plus 50. Now going to the states that disapprove of Trump. It's no surprise here that that's going to account for more of the electoral college votes, given that Trump is disapproved of according to most polls. We have Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, which disapproves of Trump by a whopping 43 percentage points. We have Colorado, New Mexico, and of course we have the eastern states here, with the exception of the state of Maine. We also have the state of Illinois here in the safe disapprove of Trump column. Now the states that approve of Trump by a likely margin. We have Missouri here in the likely column. We have the state of Iowa here in the likely column. We have the state of Ohio in the likely column. Florida in likely. We have South Carolina in likely. And surprisingly, Louisiana is in the likely column, which I would expect the state to actually be in the safe column, given that it voted for Trump by about 25 to 30% in 2024. Nevertheless, here, these states are still solidly backing Trump, albeit not by the higher margins. Before we move on to the states that disapprove of Trump by a likely margin, I did miss Virginia as a state that disapproves of Trump by a safe margin. Now, states that disapprove of Trump by a likely margin, at least according to this pollster, is quite wide-ranging. We see a few states have obviously voted for Kamala Harris by a few points back in 2024, but there's also a few states that actually voted for Trump in the past election, which disapprove of Trump by about 8%. So the few states that voted for Kamala Harris that disapproves of Trump by a likely margin includes the state of Maine. I guess that does make sense because, this is a state that voted for Kamala Harris by roughly 6%. So it does make sense that a state does disapprove of Trump. That's not super surprising. We also see in this category here the state of Minnesota. This state also voted for Kamala Harris by roughly 3%. So that's also nothing too shocking. We also see another few states here that actually voted for Trump, which disapprove of him. That includes the state of Nevada here. That is a likely disapprove of Trump state. I guess it does make sense there. There's that state did vote for Trump by about 3% back in 2024. But we see here is that there's a substantial Latino population. A lot of voters who are Latino actually voted for Trump in 2024. That was why the popular vote went for Trump. You saw a lot of Latino voters, a lot of minority voters in general, who voted for Trump against Kamala Harris, who may not necessarily like the current president as much. As such, the state of Nevada, with a huge Latino population, voted for Trump by 4. Clark County was only a 2% difference, one of the closest elections Clark County has seen on the presidential level, and yet the state still disapproves of Trump by 6%. A similar story happens in Georgia here. There's a pretty substantial African-American population in Atlanta. This type of state didn't really trend towards the Republican Party. It was more of the rural areas. You do see, of course, in the rural areas, there's still very strong support for Trump, but the urban areas do overtake that, at least according to this poll, with the state disapproving of Trump by about 8%. Now we go to the state of Michigan. Michigan voted for Trump by 2%, which to a lot of people in the mainstream media was kind of surprised by that, given the fact that Michigan is the bluest, at least according to historical numbers, of the three Rust Belt states, and a lot of people expected Kamala Harris to win the state. However, Harris drastically underperformed in Wayne County, which represents about 15% of the state's overall population, with the county shifting 9.2% more Republican. A lot of the voters that shifted were Arab Americans. Those voters either voted for Jill Stein or some third-party candidate, or chose to vote reluctantly for Donald Trump. That explains why Trump won the state of Michigan by nearly 2%. However, those voters don't necessarily approve of Trump, and thus it's not surprising that the state of Michigan also disapproves Trump by 8%, especially after, his policy towards Arab Americans, including deportations, are kind of worse than what Joe Biden's policies were back in 2023 and 2024. Now we go to the states that approve of Trump by a lead margin or 2 to 5%. In fact, there's not actually states. There's only one state, being the state of Alaska, which approves of Trump by 4%. A bit surprising given that Trump won the state by 13.1 back in 2024. But then again, of course, this map is going to look a lot bluer, or in this case, more favorable for the disapprove of Trump campaign rather than the approve of Trump campaign, since Trump is currently underwater in his approval ratings according to most pollsters. Now we go to the states that disapprove of Trump here by a lead margin, and we see most of the other swing states. Specifically, we're talking about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, two states Trump narrowly won back in 2024, and in 2016, but lost in 2020. It's no surprise that these states would disapprove of Trump, given the current polling average, which is about disapprove Trump by about 7 to about 9% is kind of like the average among the more recent pollsters. What we see in both of these states is that there's a lot of white working class voters who may not have supported Trump's tariffs. Trump tariffs are probably the biggest piece of news that's came out over the past few weeks, alongside the national security leak, which I also previously mentioned. A lot of these white-collar voters, people who are frustrated about the Biden administration's grocery prices, who voted for Trump because of those grocery prices, those are the type of moderate voters that may be disillusioned with the tariffs, and as a result may currently disapprove of Trump, even if they voted for Trump back in 2024. Now we go to the three final states here, which one state is tilt Republican or tilt approve Trump, one state is tilt disapprove of Trump, and one state is a complete toss-up, 48 to 48. Republican state on this map is the state of Texas, where according to polling, Trump has a 49% approval rating and a 48% disapproval rating. That is a lot closer than what Trump won the state by, or a 14% margin, back in 2024. Now, of course, the state was not really competitive on the presidential level. Trump had done really well and had swung almost every single county towards the Republican Party, in some cases by double digits, specifically around the more Hispanic, Latino part of the state that does border Mexico. Now we go to the tilted disapprove Trump state, and that is the state of North Carolina. North Carolina gives Trump a 48% approval rating and a 49% disapproval rating. Trump won the state by 3.2%, which is not the largest margin, explaining why Trump is kind of disapproved of there by about 1%. That's not a huge deviation from the presidential election results. And finally, Arizona, the state that voted for the Republican Party by the largest margin of any of the swing states, with every single other swing state, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, and the Rust Belt being within 3.5% for both parties. So Arizona was the least competitive swing state, and it is a toss-up, with Trump having a 48% approval and disapproval rating. Before we end this video, I want you to compare this map with the 2024 presidential election map. Obviously, the colors are inversed, but you can see that Trump is not in as good of a position as he was back in 2024. And his approval ratings have, according to this map and according to the data, fallen a bit. Trump was at about a disapprove +2 or disapprove +3 when he started the term, with some polls even suggesting that he was approved of. Now he's down to like about a disapprove +6 to a disapprove +8. That being said, this is still much better than his first term and better than most of Biden's first term in office between 2020 and 2024. Now, this map, again, also reflects another phenomenon. Despite the fact that voters may have voted for a candidate, they might not necessarily approve of them. If you add up Donald Trump's and Kamala Harris's approval rating at any given time, they equate to about 80 to 90% total. However, of course, both those candidates received about a total percentage of 98% of the popular vote. In fact, a little bit more than that, suggesting the fact that there are some voters who disapprove of both parties, and those are the type of voters that really decide who wins presidential elections. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.